Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Fontan Outcomes Network informational session. My name is Stephanie Patton. I'm a project management specialist for the network. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to go over a little bit what FON is, review the Learning Health Network model, go over our governance, share some information about our registry and legal and regulatory requirements. And then we'll go into the details of what care center expectations and benefits are for joining the network. This whole presentation will be about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we will definitely have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So we definitely welcome your questions. But with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our executive leadership team, who's going to be able to take us through the presentation today, starting off with Tom Glenn. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. We're all very excited to see so many interested care centers as we start to expand FON. I myself, I'm a patient with single ventricle physiology. I'm a pediatric cardiology fellow in San Diego, and like it was mentioned, I'm part of the ELT here at FON. So the Fontan Outcomes Network vision is really to improve outcomes and quality of life for all individuals with single ventricle heart disease and Fontan circulation. And with that, our mission, or kind of how we're going to accomplish that, is by optimizing these three main facets that are listed here. And those are physical health and functioning, neurodevelopment, and emotional health and resilience. Next slide, please. In doing this and in accomplishing our mission, there's several different projects and activities that are going to be going on, and many of which have already begun. These include, we're building a registry that will hopefully catalog all of our clinical data and map the trajectory of patients' lifespan. We're applying QI science, and in doing this, we'll hopefully create a learning platform for all of our centers. Eventually, we want to provide a foundation of clinical information that will kind of partner with our genotypic efforts. We will include diverse stakeholders that will augment the impact of our network. We're going to conduct investigative research and clinical trials. And lastly, but I think perhaps most importantly, and something that I think helps makes us stand out from other networks, is really the fact that we're building a community of patients, families, clinicians, and scientists. And having all of these different stakeholders involved, I think, is really essential. We initially launched last year and started with our 12 initial care center partners, and you can see their logos are kind of listed here on the right. We're in the process right now of actually refining our data registry, and we have now opened up applications as of a few weeks ago, applications for our second round of care centers. If you have any questions at the end of this presentation that you weren't able to ask, or things that come up, this is the email that we hope you'll reach out to. And if you have any questions about joining, this is kind of the way to go about that. And I'm going to turn it over to Carol Lannon, who's going to be talking about our Learning Health Network model now.
Thanks so much, Tom. And let me add a welcome to all of you. We're so glad that you're interested and hope you'll join FON. What I'm going to do is talk about how FON is a learning health network. And if you go to the next slide, when we conceptualize what a learning health network is, we know that it has a shared purpose among patients, clinicians, and researchers of better health and of everyone working together to improve health. We think of a network as three parts. One is the engaged social network that again has patients, parents, clinicians, and researchers. We think about, as Tom mentioned, the registry and that there's integrated data sharing and technology, and then support for both QI and research so that we're always learning and then applying what we learn and learning again from the front lines to the bench and clinical research. Next slide. So I think several of you on the call are involved with NPC QIC. And as you'll remember, when during part of NPC QIC, we began to support the design of FON. There was a real interest from patients, parents, and families to go beyond the first year of life and address additional concerns and issues for those with single ventricle disease. So during the design, we developed, as Tom said, the 3 parts of physical health and functioning, neurodevelopment, and emotional health, things that are also concepts that we're working on with NPC QIC. Next slide. So when we think about FON, we know that it's based on the NPC QIC collaborative network model. A learning health network that uses data to do research and quality improvement. NPC has improved health outcomes, including decreasing mortality and increasing growth in infants with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And FON will apply a similar framework to achieve its goals. Tom mentioned that FON was doing something, it was one of the first, and I think where FON takes it a stage beyond what NPC QIC is doing is there's really, and you'll hear some links with basic science and more of clinical science to integrate with this. So we know we're taking an ambitious approach to enroll care centers and patients. And what we want to do is engage many additional care centers beyond the first 12 and enroll 10,000 patients with Fontan circulation in the first 3 years. So we hope you'll be a part of doing that. And I'll go to the next slide, and I may be handing it off. Nope. One more, given the overlapping missions and close partnership, as I've mentioned, with FON and NPC, the leadership teams of both organizations have determined that we want to enhance collaboration and work towards becoming one organization so that it creates a seamless lifespan registry and a lifespan community for those with single ventricle. We're working on that. The timing and the requirements are involve many details, and we're thoughtfully considering them in the months ahead, and we'll share with you as a more concrete plan is developed. Next slide. And I think I'm handing this off for FON governance, and I don't remember to whom, but
me.
Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Carol. I am Diane Pickles. I'm a member of the executive leadership team for FON, and I am the mom to 2 young adults, one of whom, who is 27, is a single ventricle. He has hypoplastic left heart syndrome and has received all of his care at Boston Children's. So I'm going to walk you through, as Carol said, the FON governance. You can go to the next slide. I'm trying to click my own slides, which isn't working. I'll start by describing our executive leadership team structure, and this is sort of the structure of the whole network. But the executive leadership team is comprised of Doctors Sasha Opatowski and Jack Reichik as our executive co-directors, and also made up of Carol Lannon, who you just heard from, who's our collaborative science director, and 3 parents / patients. So we've got Stacy Lynn, who is the parent of a single ventricle daughter, and also president of Sisters by Heart, myself, and Tom Glenn, who you also just heard from. We are the parent-patient directors. And so the 5-6 of us, if I'm doing the math correctly, make up the executive leadership team. We also have a strategic advisory committee, which, just as it sounds, provides input and guidance, and Stacy Lynn chairs that group. Underneath the ELT, we have 4 work groups, which I'll go through in a couple slides. I'll go through each of those. So I won't go into much of that now, but I would say that across the 4 work groups, and kind of in between that and the ELT, we have a coordination and implementation team, which is made up of the ELT and a representative from each of the 4 work groups, and the SAC chair. And the idea there is to make sure that we've got good coordination and communication throughout and across the network. You can see in looking at this, and especially you'll see it when I go through the work group co-leaders, we have a strong commitment to co-production. And so we've got clinicians and patients and parents represented at all leadership network levels throughout the network. And you can see underneath each of the work groups there, you can see the types of activities that each of those work groups and their members will be engaged in. And none of this would be possible without the help of the wonderful staff we have at the Anderson Center and Heart Institute Research Corps, who provide our project management, a lot of our data and statistics work, quality improvement, regulatory work, et cetera. So you can go to the next slide, and I'll start walking through actually, this is just us with our lovely photos on here. You can go to the next slide, but I'll walk through, and I should have said Sasha Opatowski is from Cincinnati and Jack Reichik is from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. But I'll walk through each of our work groups. So I'll start with community building and engagement. You can see our 4 chairs on the left side of the slide. Megan Didier is an adult patient. Kurt Schumacher is a cardiologist in Michigan. Michelle Stelzer is a nurse practitioner at Lurie Children's Hospital. And Fred Wu is an adult congenital heart disease doc in Boston. They chair this wonderful work group that is really focused on building the protocols and processes that will enable us to really build the entire FON community, which is we want that to be widely and broadly comprised of patients, families, researchers, and clinicians all across the network to really engage directly in the work of the network. So the key functions of that group are to oversee all of the network communications plans and our onboarding approach for new members and centers. That's a lot of work. We have a very robust communications set of activities already in place. They're charged with developing the strategy to engage people within our network and really provide that community value. And that will include things like educational webinars, case review conferences, and other things. And maintain and foster relationships with related initiatives, such as Action, the Heart Association, Heart University, et cetera. Stacy Lynn is the ELT sponsor for this work group, and Kurt Schumacher is the coordination and implementation team representative. You can go to the next slide. Our next work group is data and analytics, and the 4 chairs of that work group are Mike DiMaria, a cardiologist from Colorado, Aaron Hoffman, who is the founder and president of Additional Ventures, which is one of our very important funders, which I'll talk about in a couple slides, Adam Lubert, who is an adult cardiologist in Cincinnati, and Rahul Rathod, who is a cardiologist in Boston. And this group is charged with operationalizing all of the collection, validation, sharing, and analysis of network data. And so they've been actively involved working with the Broad Institute in actually building the registry. They've been working very closely with the Broad on that work. This group is charged with developing all the policies and procedures around how that data will be collected and utilized, they're coordinating the implementation and the testing of that registry. So as the Broad has built it, they're providing input on the build, and then they will be charged with testing it as it is built and finalized, and developing and implementing the data management tools and analysis strategies that will be used within FON. Sasha is our ELT sponsor for that work group, and Adam Lubert is our coordination and implementation team representative. So you can go to the next slide. The third work group is our research work group, and the chairs of that group are Dave Goldberg, cardiologist from CHOP, Richard James, who is the parent of a single ventricle young adult who receives care at UPenn, I believe, I think formerly at CHOP. Nadine Kasparian, is a PhD researcher in Cincinnati, and Nancy Pike is a PhD researcher at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Our research work group is really charged quite broadly with driving the generation of new knowledge. That's their core purpose. And so what that means in practicality is that they will be really developing and refining the FON research agenda. They are developing the processes and kind of guidelines around how research requests to utilize the FON data are reviewed and accepted for research to be conducted. They are charged with reviewing IRB materials as they're developed, and they are also charged with collaborating with the data and analytics work group on the integration of key variables into the registry. And so really thinking about what are those key variables, how do they get integrated? And there's a close coordination, obviously, between the data work group and the research work group. Jack Reichik is the ELT sponsor for this group, and Dave Goldberg is our CIT rep. You can go to the next slide. Our last work group is quality improvement, not last, but certainly not least. And this group is chaired by Kiona Allen, who is a cardiologist at Lurie Children's, Katie Dodds, a nurse practitioner at CHOP, Sal Ginde, a cardiologist at Children's Wisconsin, and Alicia Wilmoth, who's an adult patient in the Cincinnati area. And the quality improvement work group is charged with guiding the network's quality improvement work to lead to quantifiable outcomes. And that's a broad mission that involves reviewing, adapting and adopting the FON improvement framework over time. They're starting with a couple, which you'll hear about, I think, in a few minutes as part of this presentation, a couple initial quality improvement activities around exercise, liver, and a few other areas. But I think exercise is the first one that group has really already started digging into. They are working with the data and analytics work group to coordinate development, testing, and implementation of the registry platform. They've done a survey of care centers who are participating to get a sense of how data will be collected and inputted into the registry. And they're charged also with developing initial standardization efforts and the educational efforts of the network. And so, as you heard me say earlier, in our desire to really build a sense of community and also provide value to participating centers, this group will be charged with coordinating educational efforts such as quarterly educational webinars, as well as some single ventricle chats for patients and parents. You can go to the next slide. So I just want to mention before I pass it off our amazing financial support. So FON is currently supported with initial funding, which has enabled us to build and launch the FON. And that funding has come from additional ventures, as I mentioned earlier, and the Congenital Heart Alliance of Cincinnati. We're also supported by will be supported by annual care center participation fees that will start this coming July. We have some grateful patients and families who have generously decided to financially support FON, and we've got some leadership gifts from the ELT. We have a sustainability work group that is working together to put together a plan and pursue additional funding through research and industry grants and additional philanthropic donors. And so that work will obviously be continuing over time. I think with that, I am turning it over to, I can't remember, who's next? Jack, maybe? Sasha?
Sasha, indeed.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for the enthusiasm. It's really exciting to see all of you here. I think I know a couple of you. I look forward to working with a lot of the others as well. So getting down to some specifics about the registry and what the process will be for enrolling patients and entering data. We can go to the next slide. So in terms of the study itself, in terms of the network, who will be eligible will be people with all ages who are living with a Fontan circulation or those for whom Fontan is planned. We will also be following patients after the Fontan, after, let's say, a transplant or a ventricular assist device to further follow up on outcomes. How will participants be enrolled? There'll be prospective enrollment with informed consent by either the patient or the parent or guardian. And participants will be enrolled at a participating care center. That might seem obvious, but there were discussions about whether if a patient or parent who is not at a participating center wanted to enroll, which we do anticipate may occur, whether there would be a way to directly enroll. And at least for now, the answer would be we wouldn't do that. The regulatory structures, there'll be a single central IRB at Cincinnati Children's, and there will each IRB at each center will rely on the central IRB with data use agreements between the center and the coordinating site. And data will be collected at or around the time of enrollment. For many, that might be at the time of the Fontan operation. But one big distinction between this registry or network and a lot of others is that there's a large cohort of patients who are currently living with a Fontan circulation. So the amount of data to collect and patients to enroll is a lot higher at first, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then we will be collecting data longitudinally. As Carol mentioned, our aspirational goal is to enroll about 10,000 individuals within the first 3 years or so, and 1,000 individuals within the first year after starting enrollment. Next slide. There have been a number of questions about timing and who we would be enrolling as a priority. The timing depends on each individual center's data use agreement and administrative regulatory issues being addressed, and also for the database being up and running and in good working order. We anticipate that will be sometime in the summer or fall of this year. In terms of who will be enrolled, this seems, again, sort of intuitive that you just enroll either any patient at Fontan, or others might think, well, any patient that you come across. But as we've considered it more with different centers, it became clear that different centers would have very different ideas of how they would approach enrollment, such that some would focus on one specific clinic or only on patients who are undergoing Fontan. And in order to really develop full capture over time, but even before that, a generally representative sample, we're going to be requesting that centers aim to enroll any individual undergoing the Fontan surgery, and also try to capture a representative sample of patients followed regularly for Fontan cardiology care. And that means not just focusing on one Fontan clinic if half the patients are being followed in other clinics throughout the hospital. Next slide. We can just go 2 more clicks, I think. So essentially, this is a very simple diagram of what will be sort of the structure of data. The care centers will collect data at specific intervals at enrollment. And then we'll talk in a second about what those specific intervals are. The data will be collected into a database, which is housed at the Broad Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then the data will be available for existing analytics and process charts and other presentations of the data that will be used for ongoing learning projects, so that will be sort of created by the data group and FON, but also available for analysis and nested research and quality improvement on a more ad hoc basis based on requests. Next slide. So in terms of the data and registry considerations, as I mentioned, at first, centers will have a large cohort of existing patients to enroll, which will be followed by, for a lifetime. And that will require ongoing extensive data collection. To support those considerable efforts that each center will be putting in, FON will provide, based on generous support by philanthropic donors, payment of $200 to centers for each initial enrollment with complete timely data entry for the first 3 years, and that will start at launch. And we anticipate and we hope that we will be able to pay that $200 for every patient enrolled. So when you see complete and timely data entry, it's not the goal isn't to be punitive, but rather just to make sure that a center doesn't enroll a patient, just put in a name and not have the resources to put in data for that patient, to make sure that we have information. We'll also, at or soon after launch, aim to have a mechanism for bulk data import. So if your center has a database that's existent already, or simplistically say lab tests in your EHR that can be easily exported, that will be able to be bulk imported into the database pretty early on, if not right at the start. And probably by the time that your centers are enrolling, this should be up and running to make that less of a data burden. We will be working on ways to connect existing data repositories that each center holds for other data sets such as PC4, and then directly link them to FON so that your center can extract the data and share with FON, but also over a somewhat longer term, directly link with CNU databases like CNOC or PC4 in order to have bidirectional sharing to enrich all the data sets. Over a longer period of time, over a matter of, let's say, 2 or 3 years, we anticipate being able to integrate EHR data collection into data capture for FON, such that there wouldn't need to be duplicate data entry. And as clinicians are documenting, they'll essentially be recording data in a FON format for many of the variables. You can go ahead there. Next slide. So taking a step back, what's our vision for the data? Why are we collecting all this data? I think everyone here, probably it's a bit intuitive why, but as we thought about it, there are a number of reasons. One is to standardize, align how we collect data across sites in order to make it easier to interpret information from different centers and compare. Improve, identify areas for improvement and look at variation between centers, identifying best practices, then track the impact of quality improvement efforts over time. Share, we really want to facilitate the flow of data between centers and with investigators. We want to link connecting FON data with other data sources. I mentioned CNOC is one. Project Singular is a bit different, not necessarily in the same CNU world as CNOC and PC4, but rather is a genomic initiative, which will be patient-facing, where patients can enroll and will be genome sequencing available. And we look forward to enriching our data and increasing the power by linking to that data set and also bidirectional sharing. We really want to enhance the quality, volume, and efficiency of the way we collect data for the centers participating, such that we can support those other aspects. Next slide. Taking a step forward to legal and regulatory, again, I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this so that we have time for discussion. I'm sure you all have questions. There are 2 main legal documents that are required to move forward with being participating in FON and enrolling patients. One is a business associate agreement, which really lays out expectations for how institutions handle private patient information. These are generally pretty templated, and I doubt that it'll cause much consternation. And then a data use agreement, how the centers in the registry will work together and how data can be shared and used. And one important thing to note is that we're pretty ambitious with FON, learning from experiences from prior registries and databases where one, I think the regulatory environment was different, but 2, people didn't want to address some difficult issues, such as sharing identifiable information, such that it can be challenging with some of the existing databases to share bidirectionally and to have linkages go in both directions. So our goal is to have data such that when a patient enrolls, let's say in Cincinnati, and is then seen in Dallas or at Vanderbilt, I don't know why you'd want to leave Cincinnati, but okay, then we would be able to identify that patient and not have to enroll them again. And the data entered would just have to be additive to what's already been enrolled. You can go to the next slide. So the single IRB really, I think, will make everyone's life easier over the long term, both at the sites, I think more at the sites, but also I think for FON overall, that each site will rely on this single IRB, which will ease the common multi-site challenges, such as if you have a small change, it then has to go to 20, 30, 40 IRBs. It simplifies collaboration such that when one request data, we don't necessarily have to do it through multiple IRBs, and it also just streamlined that IRB process. The responsibility will be ours to have that IRB oversight. Each site will collaborate with their own IRB to make sure that they will rely and keep them informed and complete required documents for both their own IRB and for FON. There will be small changes in terms of the HIPAA language for consent forms, and so we will keep track of that. And then all returning to us all documents to be filed by CCHMC and filing it at their site. Then each site will be responsible for local regulatory trainings for their own staff and completing ancillary reviews as necessary. Regulatory documents, there's Lauren Blizzard, who is our regulatory guru, has put together a nice set of documents to complete. When you apply, not if, but when you apply to join us, you'll be notified of acceptance by May 20th, and then the IRB and DUA process can start right away as you think appropriate, and sooner better than later, given, as we all know, how long contracts can take. And then we'll begin onboarding and training in the summer of 2022. The next slide. And now I think I pass it off to Jack.
Thanks, Sasha. And let me, in addition, add my thanks to those of you that are on the call today with your interest and eagerness to join what I think will be really a game-changing organization and will make some major impacts on our care for patients with single ventricle Fontan circulation. What I'm going to do over the next couple of slides is take a bit of a step back from the regulatory aspects and the registry itself and talk more about the transactional aspects between FON and each of the individual care centers. So next slide. So just to iterate what some of the benefits are, and yes, Stephanie, you can go ahead and bring all of these bullets up. What might one be able to list? And this is not an exhaustive list, but some examples of what some of the care center benefits might be. Time-limited financial support to assist with initial data entry. Very few registries that I'm aware of in congenital heart disease, where we're actually supporting participation and capitating for entry into the registry itself. We're very fortunate to have the support to do this. And the objective here is to incentivize a rapid entry of patients so that we can really begin to study, collect data, and learn something from the registry as soon as we get started. Improvements in both patient outcomes and family partnership is shown by prior learning networks. So there's a wealth of experience for the past decade in a number of different learning networks and the potential benefits to members thereof. And so membership gives you that opportunity to gain from the learning network. Use of an advanced flexible data platform with analytics and patient assessments, allowing detailed tracking of Fontan care through the lifespan and tackling of questions that might arise as well from the data that's derived. The work that's being done with the Broad will give us that state-of-the-art platform. Access to registry data for quality improvement efforts. Authorship opportunities. This is a network collaborative, and so there's no question that we're going to be interested in having many stakeholders take advantage of the rich registry and the rich collection of data that we intend to acquire and have that shared throughout the community so that many folks can take leadership leads and authorship in various research endeavors. Faculty and staff will have opportunities to serve in various work groups and committees and contribute to the effort overall. And something that's happening already, even without a scratch of data yet collected, are these case review conferences that we've been holding. We've had 3 of them now held every other month, sponsored initially, or at least coordinated initially by CHOP, Texas Children, most recently the Mayo Clinic last week, on daily topics, things that we all witness and see on a regular basis. Patients who may have a challenging problem on the floor, and we know that other centers are similarly having those types of challenges and issues. It's a way for us to collaborate and share knowledge. Next slide. Network deliverables and care center support. What are we going to ask of you? So to go through this quickly, to support the network to achieve its goals, provide collaborative foundation, tools, and resources to support care teams in identifying, addressing opportunities for improvement and research, support the implementation of a population-based registry to be used for QI research and clinical decision-making. Go back. Provide secure HIPAA-compliant data management, provide best practice information on care tools, organize and conduct educational webinars and a variety of different committee calls, coordinate communication across all centers to provide participants with analyses. In order to do all of this, we have some of the members of our fantastic staff that you see here at the moment, but in the background and in the foreground, just not seeing on the Zoom call today, a number of individuals who are really very experienced and dedicated to making this effort work and work smoothly. Next. What do we want of you, our expectations? So I suspect we might get some questions on this, but and these slides will be provided to you afterwards, so you can review them and study them. We're going to want a formal commitment of support from the leadership at each of your centers. A commitment that provides a statement, signatory onto the necessary resources that will be required in order to succeed at these network activities. We're going to ask for consideration of your centers putting together a multidisciplinary team that will include some folks that are already on this call. Obviously, you're all interested in this, a pediatric and an adult cardiologist potentially, individual with single ventricular congenital heart disease or a parent, an NP or nurse that may be responsible for Fontan care, a psychologist, mental health worker, social worker, a research coordinator, and the potential for collaboration with what we know is the growing list of individuals and healthcare providers who are all contributing to care of our Fontan patients, those in the realms of hepatology, neurodevelopment, potentially imaging and such. We're going to ask that we designate one member of your team to be the PI for your site. One member of the core team should be designated as the care site's point of contact. We're going to ask for timely communication and return when we send out emails and request and invite folks to join informational webinars, and to pay an annual participation fee beginning in the summer of 2022. Next. The fee to participate in FON is going to be $15,000 per academic calendar year, starting from July, ending in June, per care center. We have, as you've heard, partnered with a number of funders to support and capitate the first 3 years of this effort up to 10,000 patients. It'll be a one-time support payment of $200 per head. If you do some quick math on the back of a napkin, that means if you enroll 75 patients, that will mean a support to the center of $15,000, which will cover this particular participation fee. Next. We're going to be asking centers to capture our patients longitudinally across the lifespan. We encourage strong collaboration between pediatric centers and adult centers. We do very much appreciate that every region, every locale, every institution is going to have somewhat of a different relationship between the pediatric and adult centers and healthcare providers. We're very interested in working with centers to help work that through. And I think it's going to have to be individualized for different care centers. Next slide. So next steps. We're asking for the FON application on May 2nd, 2022. An acceptance will be provided by May 20th of 2022. New centers can begin the regulatory process upon acceptance. And we anticipate onboarding in July with the following web informational webinars on July 22nd and July 26th. Again, you'll get copies of these slides. All this information will be forwarded to you once we're done. And just some additional pieces of information for further information in general about FON. We are all of our contacts and such are available to you. We're happy to answer questions afterwards. as you're formulating your thoughts about what you've heard today, we've got about 15, 20 minutes or so, so we'll take some questions in a moment. And lastly, we are all extremely grateful for this really incredible opportunity to launch this. And none of this could be done without these amazing supporters, Additional Ventures, which is a foundation on the West Coast that is sponsoring this effort to a great degree, as well as a significant contribution from the Congenital Heart Alliance, and our partnership with National Pediatric Cardiology Quality Improvement Collaborative, Organizations of Sisters by Heart, and our joint partnership with Cardiac Networks United. So with that, I think I'll end, and we encourage questions. No such thing as silly questions here at all. There's a lot of material you've heard, and so let's have a good exchange, and let's open this up.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of our executive leadership team members who presented. I also wanted to just give a shout out to Stacy Lynn, who is our 6th ELT member, as well as our strategic advisory committee. She is on today as well, but did not present since she was on vacation for our first one. But Stacy, thank you for being here, and hopefully it can answer some questions from individuals. We are going to go ahead and open it up for a Q&A. So you can either go ahead and type your questions in the chat, or if you're comfortable, feel free to come off mute and ask your question. We already have one question in the chat, so we can go ahead and get started with this one while everyone else is thinking of their questions. We have one that says, so both pediatric and adult centers will fall under the same central IRB, or do we need to add them as 2 different sites? Sasha, are you able to answer that?
Sure. It's complicated because well, I guess the answer is no, I can't answer it, but I can do my best. Every adult and pediatric site's relationship together is different. Often, like here or CHOP, they're 2 separate institutions, although have some partnership and maybe the same university, but different IRBs. I'm not sure in Dallas how that works, but it would be up to the site to determine how that relationship will work. From the FON perspective, we strongly favor having both pediatric and adult care included under the single care center. So that if there is an adult clinic at, say, UT Southwestern and a mostly pediatric clinic at Children's Dallas, then we would favor having both sites enroll as a site together and pay only 1 fee and not 2. And the additional work will be trying to figure out with the 2 IRBs how they can rely together. They could have to rely separately, but if they were often 2 sites like that of the same university have figured out ways to work together in things like this. So it will be a discussion between you and your the IRBs and your colleagues at the adult or pediatric institution. And then we're happy to also help and discuss about the regulatory side. But we'll have to talk about each of these situations separately as they come up. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Sasha.
Sorry, can I chime in real quick? That was me, Ms. Bed, that asked the question. So with that being said, for the adult world, like if they have, we do have an adult ACHD clinic at UT that sees, Fontan patients, as well as a Fontan clinic at Children's, and they do often collaborate. But for example, if we have had an adult patient seen at UT, that was transitioned a while ago, but they had their original Fontan surgery at Children's, but now 40 years old being seen at the adult clinic. Is that a patient that would be enrolled in the registry?
The goal would be that if in the best of worlds, both UT and the Pediatric Children's Hospital would both together join FON as one center. And I think Jack has expressed from the Philadelphia standpoint that that's, it's a natural thing and it's a good thing to encourage. both for clinical care, but also I think the idea would be that person, wherever they got their Fontan, they may have even had it at, in Cincinnati and then moved to Dallas, that person would still be enrolled, whether they were seen in the adult or pediatric clinic. If they were enrolled in the adult clinic and then went to the children's hospital for a procedure, for example, that would be captured in FON. So yes, that patient would be enrolled.
Yeah. So just to add just another way of saying that also. So the answer to your question would be yes, we would absolutely want that patient enrolled. That is one of the most highly desirable of patients, just considering the richness of data that exists since birth for that 40-year-old, 30-year-old, or what have you. So we are very eager to enroll adults in this. But this, we imagine, will be a challenge very specific to many, many different regions and many different locations. So your particular patient that you just described as an example may be very similar to something we may see here, and Sasha mentioned Cincinnati as well. From a registration and FON perspective, what we are saying is that we would consider it a joint center and $15,000 participation fee. But how you then enroll that patient is going to be up to you and the collaboration you create between your pediatric and your adult center. For a 40-year-old, I would imagine the recruitment and registration of that patient would happen through the adult center that is seeing that patient as an outpatient. They happen to come in, boom, they would then get consented and enrolled at that point in time. The data collection, obviously, for that may require some element of collaboration between the adult group and what's happened in the pediatric group, but you may have that data already. I imagine you probably do. So, and I can foresee a number of different permutations of how that's going to work at different centers.
Great. Thank you, Jack and Sasha, for sharing that information. We do have a couple more questions in the chat that I want to make sure we get to. From Michelle, can you discuss what access participating centers will have to their own center's data? Is this something that can easily be queried, or would centers need to submit a more formal request? Sasha, you want to take that one?
Sure. So at this point, we don't have all the data infrastructure developed, but I will tell you what our goal is, and I think it will be achievable. And that is a center should have full access to their own data. Exactly what that will look like in terms of, can you directly download any identifiable information? Who would be able to do it? I'm not sure, but the idea would be there should really be no substantive obstacle to an investigator from Cincinnati downloading Cincinnati's data. So from that perspective, we would like that to be, there's no reason not to do that. That sort of enables this to be used as a Fontan database for your center or something of that sort. Usually for a lot of centers, there's sort of a data amalgamation in another data set like Cardio Access or Lumetics that then gets pushed to say PC4 or FON. So you may already have the data. But if you directly enter the data, it somehow gets in there, we should be able to do that. I think that one caveat to how this would be used as a database, if you want to say, oh, this will be our Fontan database, if there are patients who don't enroll in FON, then it would be more challenging for us to have you enter that data. I don't know that that's not solvable. We would just have to be able to identify that and figure out a way to hide that from us, but that is not set up at this point, and we'd have to think about regulatory issues. Does that address your question?
Sasha, this is Carol. I just wanted to add something to that. Michelle, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the NPC QIC registry, and Linda Lambert, I know, is on and could get you access to that if not, but with all the data, you can go on and we're, again, the broad is building the FON registry, but our plan is that you can go on, see your data, see how you compare on certain measures to the aggregate, and you can actually look at your own data over time to see, how you're doing in different areas. So a little different, I think you may have been asking, and Sasha was talking about downloading all of it. And there'll also be graphs that show you how you're doing in that. So if you're not familiar with how that looks for NPC, I think Linda can get you access to that and help, or Nalanji, who's at Utah as well.
Thank you, Carol, for adding that. Our next question in the chat from Catherine: how would a patient who transfers to a transplant center be followed?
I put an answer there. That's a good question. Because we haven't enrolled a patient yet, we haven't had our first that would have a transplant, and so we haven't delved very deeply into the longer term outcomes. And I think that in some places that patient would be still followed at the same center. I'd say probably the majority, but not an overwhelming majority. And so if a patient transferred, there are a few ways we could address that. One is that we could have ongoing contact with the participant as part of the consent. The network has the ability to directly contact participants. In general, the way we would think about that would be generally if someone's enrolled, say in Dallas, and there's a survey to share with them that doesn't have to do with a clinic visit or whatnot. And then that may be directly sent to them. We don't have plans to do that at this point, but that is a way we could, every year or whatnot, touch base with the patient and see, or their parents, to see how they're doing, and keep an eye on them. We can't necessarily engage with every one of the transplant centers unless they're also in FON, since then they would have to be, from an IRB standpoint, part of FON. But if, let's say, someone from Cincinnati goes to Vanderbilt and gets a transplant, then in theory that patient could then be a FON patient at Vanderbilt. It would just be tricky, I think, to track them, since their underlying diagnoses and ICD codes and how they'd be captured would be different. But it's something we need to think through.
Great, thank you, Sasha. Another question in the chat from Angela. Curious what percentage of an FTE for a research coordinator would likely be needed to allocate for this at each center?
I think I might defer that to Jack.
Yeah, because that's an exact question that I'm contemplating right now for our own center. And I think the obvious answer here is going to be, depends upon the work effort you anticipate and the number of patients you would imagine enrolling. Yeah. Actually, it's a great question, and because it does force each center to sort of think about the sources of where these patients are going to come from, which we've started to do. And I know FON itself has started to engage the current 12 centers in a conversation about looking at particular workflows of the patient recruitment and such. So, the questions we're asking ourselves are, okay, how many Fontans do we do a year? Because we're going to want to enroll the patients right after the Fontan. How many aggregate patients do we see in the various clinics? Where are our clinics? Are they centralized, decentralized, satellite clinics? Is there an adult program or not? And an assessment needs to be made of those variables, and a judgment made as to what the FTE would be required. We're thinking it'll be one full FTE for us as a full-time job, and somebody who would also become a part of the network and make it part of their culture to be working on this for the next few years. And we'd want to cultivate that person, get the right person and such. So I've talked to a variety of different centers. I know Children's Hospital of LA, for example, very different model. They have a number of private practice groups that are out there. They've got some other challenges of trying to coordinate things there. Some centers are looking at adding this on to some individuals who may be involved with NPC QIC already or such. And I think it ultimately derives from what your Fontan volume might be. And so beginning to do some of those things, getting an assessment internally of how many patients with a Fontan circulation you follow at your particular institution will get you started.
Stephanie, you sent me a note about, hi Trudy, nice to see you on. There are several questions in the enrollment form and in the ongoing clinic visit form about emotional health. We know how important this is to patients and families. We also know that not every center has a dedicated psychologist for the clinic. So I think that was a suggestion, and we'll work with you. And as we've done in NPC, we'll be able to have some psychologists, Erica Sood, Adrian Kovacs, who can come on and give some guidance. They were both involved in some of the design. And actually, Trudy, we have some questions about was emotional health discussed? And then there are some things, a promise measure, which is more of a general measure. And Adrian Kovacs was going to come on and talk about that at some point when we're ready. I'll also put a plug in, Trudy, you may have seen there's the roadmap project, which is being offered to NPC and FON, and has it's sort of a basic way to begin some of this. So if you don't have a psychologist, or if you do, we'd welcome you to participate in that. And I'd be glad to follow up with you on that.
Thank you, Carol. We have a couple minutes left. If anyone has any final questions, we can probably take one or two more. If not, we will share the link to the FON application in the chat again. That also connects to our FON application packet, which shares a lot of this information in it as well. And we also will be sending out the slide deck from today to all participants. So if you do have any questions following today's presentations, don't hesitate to contact us. That email again is info@fontanoutcomesnetwork.org.
Thank you.
Don't have any other questions, and thank you all so much for coming today. We really appreciate your interest. Trudy just had one more question. Has the CCHMC IRB been approved for this?
I'll just let my dancing do the talking. Yes. Yes, it has.
Take that as a yes.
That was not approved by the IRB, but the protocol was.
Or by FON staff. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate your interest and hope you have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.